Olli-Pekka, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for having a conversation with me. Where are you phoning in from?
Thank you very much for the opportunity to join. Really, Matthew, enjoy this opportunity. I'm joining in from Geneva, Switzerland, where I'm located here and have been living here for 5 years now.
Fantastic. I spent many happy summers in Geneva. I was born in the UK, and it is down in Lake Geneva, probably one of the most beautiful places in the world. And I don't know if there still is a diving board in the middle of the lake, but that's how I kind of learnt to swim jumping off that thing. Geneva's a beautiful city, isn't it? What do you love most about it?
I think I love most the kind of diverse opportunities that it offers. That there is, of course, the city, there's the international part, there is the commercial part and the old city, but then there is, of course, the lake and the opportunities connected to the lake, but then also the landscape is very, very close and the mountains. So you can really choose and pick that what's your feeling today, what kind of things you would like to experience. I'm an outdoors person, so I like to go walking and running and hiking a lot, and this is a perfect place for that.
Fantastic. Quite possibly the most important question for our conversation. What's your coffee order for when I can finally nip over to Geneva and buy you a coffee?
Well, my coffee order is it's cappuccino with oat milk.
Fantastic. Is it a good coffee culture over in Geneva?
Yes, you can find good coffee here, but
Good.
it's not very easy to find actually oat milk. The kind of vegan sometimes has a bit of a hard time here, but otherwise all good.
Fantastic. A book that's caused you to stop and reconsider how you see the world.
I think for me, I'm a heavy reader, constantly read both factual and fiction. But I think that the book has mostly influenced the way I look at the world is a book by a writer called Ian McGilchrist, comes from Scotland. And the name of the book is The Master and His Emissary.
Fantastic.
And it is really about kind of looking at the world in a different way. That's based on hard evidence on neuroscience. And it really kind of has changed the way that I perceive what's happening in the world.
Fantastic. That's really lovely. I mean, this podcast is becoming quite expensive because every time I speak to somebody, a new Amazon package arrives at my door. So I'll make sure I add that one to my next shipment. Olli-Pekka, there's so much, or so many questions that I have, but I would love to go back to the beginning and talk about how your experience growing up in a Finnish schoolhouse shaped your understanding of learning. Take me all the way back to the beginning, and what were some of those formative moments for you?
Well, I would say that maybe the most formative values come from my very early age. My father was a teacher. We were living in the school building, so
You're
I
actually
experienced.
living at school.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
wow. Yeah.
Yeah, my first 6 years before going to school. So I would say that kind of curiosity towards learning and knowing has been very central growing in Finland. And then, of
Mm.
course, the basic core value of equality among people is something that is very, very strongly embedded in the
Mm.
Finnish way of thinking about education and how the
Mm.
education system is built. So that is central. And then maybe the third element, which I've experienced in my own school path, but also kind of seen it on a system level, is the element of trust. Trust that really goes through the different layers of the education system all the way to the student and to the teacher.
Mm.
So I would say that those are the kind of
Yeah.
most important elements.
I mean, the Finnish education system is held up as a great way of doing things in terms of education. I mean, it's consistently ranked outperforms so many other education systems around the world. What is it that you think is so special about the way that the Finns approach education, and what can we learn all the way over here in Australia? Because it consistently seems to, it's always in the news for doing incredibly innovative things. What is it that's so special?
I would say that, first of all, is the question of how the society and communities around schools value education, what's happening in schools and classrooms. And that can be seen also as a respect and support for the teacher profession. The other element is that question that we have had for a long time. The teacher education has happened on universities with a master level degree, and that kind of gives the teachers the ability to embed the newest learnings of research to their teaching and learning, because they have also the autonomy to do that. So I often ask young students who are studying to be teachers that why do you want to be a teacher? What's the reason there?
It's a great question.
And I know that they say that it's not the pay, that we could be paid better. And well, that's true. We're about paying on the level of OECD average. But then the main reason they see for that choice is that they feel that they are in charge of developing their own work and what is happening in their classrooms. So really that they have the capability through the education that they get to become a teacher, but then they also have the possibility to act out that capability in their classrooms. I think that's a very strong combination. Maybe the third one, which I think needs to be mentioned also, is that Finland has for a long time been a very homogeneous culture. So certain things have been easier for us maybe to develop the education system in a holistic way, that it's kind of, we are such a small society that it's easy to gather all the central actors around the same table and come into agreement of the direction for the future.
What was your experience like as the Minister for Education? And what are you most proud of from your time in office?
Well, my experience was that, as I said, that Finland is quite a small country, and what I saw that is functioning very well, and it was kind of very natural for me. I didn't make a kind of a choice that this is the way I'm going to work, but it was the way that I felt, that way that we should work. That is like when we are doing reforms, that we gather all the stakeholders together, including actually the students. And we do the work together. We discuss it, we look at different options, and we kind of then make decisions. And of course, the minister is the decision maker. I don't see still that the minister makes decisions in a vacuum, but I felt that my role as a minister was more to pick up the half-cooked decisions that were already there. They were kind of, I saw that there is now a readiness there. And then my task was really to see that when there is enough support for us to go forward with certain things. And we actually, during my ministerial years, we reformed the whole legislation in education, kind of consisting from the early years to the universities and adult education, and was passed kind of almost, that there were very few members of the parliament who had different opinion, but 90% of the parliament voted for it. So I think that kind of showed that once you do the preparation in a very inclusive way, then you get also the commitment of that. And also the learning is that it makes the implementation much easier. Once you've done it together, for example, the teacher unions and kind of heads of schools and municipalities, they know what to expect. So after that, the implementation is easier.
Olli-Pekka, I'd be really interested to hear what you learned about yourself during your time in office. What are some of your reflections?
I was very young when I became a minister. I was
Mhm.
29 years old,
That's very
and
young.
it is. And I think that what changed the most is that how I saw what leadership is about.
Mm,
That I do remember that when I entered, I kind of had a feeling of of a leader as a minister needs to be kind of tough
mm,
and kind of say what needs to be done, and kind of a heroic leadership idea that I ride with a white horse and I save the world and I
yeah.
ride on to the sunset. And I found very soon that that won't work.
Mm,
That truly doesn't work. So that type of a more
interesting.
of a servant leadership, actually minister word by kind of the etymological background is connected to serving.
Mm,
And in that sense, that idea of being in service of others was the
mm,
kind of a humble leadership was a term that later we took in use in
mm.
Finnish government. What was something that was my biggest learning lesson.
Yeah. And not to get too political, but when I look around the world, I think that there are lot of lessons that could be learnt from leadership as an act of service and not ego. I think that's incredibly important. What did you learn about handling stress and handling complexity? Are you somebody that can naturally switch off? I mean, you mentioned before that you love being outdoors and running. Did that become something which was crucial to you at that time? Tell me a little bit about that. How did you handle some of that stress and some of that pressure?
I when I started as a minister, I do remember that during the first half a year, I thought that I dropped my kind of exercise routines because I felt that the ministerial tasks are so important that I don't have time
I
for
think we've
that
all been
now.
there. Yeah.
And then after that half a year, I understood that if I don't do my exercise, I cannot do my ministerial job.
Mm.
That I don't have the energy and I don't have the ability to see the big picture if I also don't take care of my own well-being. So I have had for a long time a daily routine of exercise. At those years, it was running. I woke up very early every morning and I go running in the morning. I think that was very important. That was also when I kind of planned the day. That's
Mm.
when I kind of mentally went through that what's in front of me and what kind of situations will there be to be ready for the day. And I've continued with that actually. I've done my morning exercises today and I do it every day, and that's who I am. I could not live without that.
It's something that you take quite seriously.
It is. It is. So I have my running shoes wherever I travel. I have every time them with. I have some of my kind of exercising equipment with me wherever I travel.
Mm.
I just cannot. And it's not only actually, it's not only exercise, it's what has become more important. And I've included those elements is the kind of more mindfulness type of things to
Mm.
ground yourself, to be in touch with yourself, which in these times we're living with the crazy things in the world, it's more and more important for me at least.
Fantastic. It's really inspiring to hear, and it's something which I'm trying to get better at. I tend to do intense amounts of exercise sporadically, but I would love to develop more of a habit of consistency. I think the older that I get, I've just turned 41. I feel like this is the time for me that's either make or break. And so it's inspiring to know that you can build those habits of consistency at whatever point in your life. So I have no excuse. I'll put my running shoes on tomorrow and go for a run.
Very good.
Becky, you talk so much about education systems as living organisms or living systems. Why is this so important, and why do you use that turn of phrase?
For me, it's connected to the discussion that we often hear in education systems that there is too much change, kind of. And at the same time, it's not one or two times that I've heard an educator say that there is so much constant change and nothing really is changing. That there is actually, there's a willingness to see certain change, but there's only kind of the talk about the change, but not true change. To understand education systems and schools as living human systems is central for the reason to understand that those systems don't stay same. They change because we humans, we grow, constantly grow. Physically, we grow. Mentally, we grow in our thinking and looking at the world. And that has an impact on those systems. And it has an impact on the relationships in the system. And it's also important for decision makers to understand that they are not outside those living systems, but their relationship within that system is important. It matters. They cannot kind of say that they are engineers who are fixing the problems of the system. That will never work, because whatever decisions they make, it will impact the system in a way that it's very hard to actually predict what the outcome is if you try to fix it from outside. So us seeing the understanding that a living system can be understood only by living within it.
I think that's so important. And it's so wonderful to hear you speak from experience. I think respectfully, I know in Australia, I can't talk about Finland, but in Australia, I think so many people have an opinion about how education should be run, but have never actually worked in schools or stepped inside a classroom. It's really refreshing to hear somebody with your experience, both part of a system and us, and also looking into it. I think that's so important. I mean, how do we, with these adaptive systems, how do we help students embrace uncertainty? I mean, you look at the world at the moment, it is incredibly uncertain. There's so much happening. How do we begin to build systems that are responsive to this ever-changing world? I know that is a huge question, but do you have any thoughts on that?
It is a big question. It definitely is. I think one thing is that question of being comfortable with uncertainty. And that is also connected to the question of right answers. That if we are kind of emphasizing a way of learning where there is the right answer is the thing that is valued. And of course, this has a connection also to the AI world that we are experiencing now. And we don't understand that it is the question of the path, that how to get there, that truly matters. And that is something that can enable kind of deep learning. And by that, I mean learning where what you learn becomes part of your own identity. It is after that, when you have figured it out, you cannot take it out. It is part of who you are. And that's what education should aim at. And it's helping students to be comfortable in that territory which is unknown. Because that's the territory where learning happens. What's happening in classrooms, it's also connecting to the whole system. If we think that we can have metrics, we have KPIs for teachers, then there is that idea that somebody knows the right answers better than what's the reality in classrooms. I just don't believe in that. And when we have actually a Nobel level research done on that question, which says that if you try to do that with vocations like teaching, then you emphasize the kind of targets that can be measured, and you neglect the ones that cannot be. And I would say that the ones that cannot be measured are the most important kind of aims of education.
Yeah. Olli-Pekka, what were you like at school? And was there a teacher that made a difference in your life? It's a very personal.
Yeah, of course. kind of come, as I said, my father was a teacher, and that meant that I have kind of learned the school culture on a very young age. I definitely was an achiever for a long time in school, which means that I did everything that was needed to be done in school, and what I was asked to do, and I got good grades and all that. But it was kind of only on the upper classes that I started to truly engage in my own learning, and I started to have that doubt also with learning, which is so important. And then I would say that that kind of a more of an explorer approach grew into me to be, and that curiosity about that, can you see things also differently, and why are things the way they are? Those questions came to my mind more and more often.
Was there a teacher that made a particular difference?
I think there was one teacher who was a he taught psychology, history, and he he was a very strong personality,
Mm.
and told a lot of stories, and kind of made fun uh, in classroom, and but he was the one who really did his best to make us look at the world in a different way, really to engage us in that thinking, and also to help us create that critical thinking muscle of kind of course,
Yeah.
because you need to have
Yeah.
you need to have a stand, you need to take a
Yeah.
position. So you need to know yourself first before you can think
Yeah.
critically
How,
and hold your position.
yeah.
And that's what I've learned from him.
How did his classroom make you feel?
I enjoyed them. I enjoyed them a lot. History lessons, for example, maybe sometimes can be quite boring, but because of his storytelling capabilities, they were a lot of fun.
Amazing.
Uh, yeah, and also same with psychology. There are still kind of things that come back from those classes. And of course, there was also, you always kind of anticipated or waited for those classes because there was a very open and friendly atmosphere in the classrooms. The school I went to was it had been a private kind of religious school, and it had just turned a general comprehensive school in Finland, but still the old values were there.
Right.
So the rules were pretty strict in that class, and this teacher was an exception to that.
That's really interesting. I mean, I've had the immense privilege of interviewing over 250 people for this podcast series, and every time I ask that question, nobody ever talks about content. They always talk about how the teacher made them feel. And I think that's a really lovely link to what you're saying before about some of those skills that can't be measured in
Yeah.
teaching or shouldn't be measured. I
Yeah.
mean, what do you think the role of the teacher is? I mean, and what are some of the things that you think have remained or should remain consistent in this era of what's
Mm.
the with AI coming in and Google knowing so much more than I ever could? Do you think the role of the teacher is one which is still as significant as it has always been?
I think it is even more significant for the reason that the core task of a teacher to know his or her students is so central. And we humans, some researchers say that the idea of teaching somebody, having another person showing you a direction where to steer your attention is truly a human capability. And of course, learning has been something that has been a survival mechanism for us to adapt in different circumstances all around the globe. And the idea that how to build that human connection, that relationship, and that trust among the teacher and the learner in a way that the student can say that, actually, I don't understand this. You need to have a certain amount of trust that to happen, because the student shows vulnerability with saying that. But without that kind of a possibility with the teacher, it won't happen. And then the ability, especially for the formative assessment type of skills, where not by what I mean, having that constant feedback loop with the student, which aims at learning, and gradually also the student to take more responsibility of his or her own learning. I see that in the age of AI, those are the topics that are becoming more and more important. And for that, we need the teacher agency to stay strong. And that's maybe something I'm a bit worried about with the AI applications, because I would not want to see the teachers changing their agency to kind of things being more easy or kind of comfortable. I would say that the true AI innovations don't happen in tech companies. They happen just in classrooms, when it's actually the teacher who puts her or his pedagogy into that learning.
Yeah. It is I think, a period of dramatic change for teachers all over the globe. And it's really reassuring, I think, to hear people like you championing the role of educators and talking about the importance of trust and relationships and empathy and compassion in the classrooms, all of these things that you can't get from a chatbot. It's really lovely to hear that those skills are still incredibly important. Tell me a little bit about your role as the Director General of the International Baccalaureate. I had the immense privilege in the first school that I worked at of being part of an IB school, and it really did change the game for me with how I thought about education. But tell me about that experience, and what are you most proud of in that role?
It is a huge role, but I start with the proudness. I'm very proud of the IB community.
It's incredible.
And I'm not then talking only about the organization. I'm talking about the educators. I'm talking about almost 50,000 IB Educator Network members who around the world are contributing,
Gosh.
helping their peers, to giving the professional development workshops, to doing the school visits, the evaluation, writing uh, the exam questions, and so on. I think there are 57 different tasks that they are doing in the IB community. And that's remarkable. Like, for example, we have 4 global conferences a year where there's about 2,000 educators in each of them coming together. And they are by atmosphere very unique. Kind of positivity, the kind of support, the peer-to-peer support, the willingness to learn is something that I have not experienced anywhere else.
It sounds like it
But
fills you with hope.
definitely
Yeah.
it does. It does. And a lot of energy.
That's incredible. And I'll make sure I put links to all of the IB resources in our show notes. And we couldn't possibly unpack all of the amazing work that the IB is doing across the world. But for those that are not aware, what's particularly unique about the IB approach to education? What are some of the things you're doing that others might not be aware of?
Well, I would say it's the inquiry-based approach, which is very central. That question, an ability to ask the right questions and do it constantly. And that's what I hear often parents saying, that has changed not only their own child's approach, but it has changed the dinner discussions that they are having at home, that they have kind of gotten an entirely different flavor. But it's then also of course, the question of tackling those big concepts from the very beginning of starting with the questions, which are very central these days, that who are we, where do we come from, where are we going, to understand oneself and understand one's own culture, language, values, and then have the ability for that intercultural understanding and respect which is of course very central for IB, because IB was created with the idea of creating a certificate that would be accepted by universities everywhere in the world. And of course, that is something that international mindedness that goes through all the programs from 3 years to 19 years. And then, of course, there are certain elements that other systems don't have in that way. And I would like to maybe raise two, especially. Yeah, the kind of theory of knowledge, that idea of understanding the different types of knowledge, and what is true and what can we believe in. And again, in these times of deep fakes and all that, it's so central that young people are capable of understanding and being critical on what they experience as information and evidence. And then there is that idea of showcasing what you're capable of doing, that kind of different portfolio type of elements that are there in all the programs, where you do an exhibition or you do a kind of a course for the best of the community around you, which is something that there's a lot of talk nowadays about the well-being of young people. And I do that we need to have the experts to help those young people. But I don't think that we can just continue hiring new psychologists to schools. We need to find other ways. And we know that actually one of the best ways to improve your own well-being is to help somebody else's well-being. Yeah. And that's really what the CAS idea is, that you are doing a project to do good for others. And through that, you see your own value, see that it matters what you are capable of doing. Yeah. And you also see that relationality, that kind of neededness that there is between us humans. And those are some of the elements, that kind of value-based or value-centered pedagogy that you often don't see in other systems. And that's actually a requirement to graduate with IB. You have to do it. If you don't pass that one, you will not graduate.
Yeah. And I remember in my first year of teaching, I was in a wonderful school called Trinity Grammar over here in Sydney, and it was just an incredible organization. And I remember I was teaching year 5 and year 6 at the time, and we were looking at student portfolios, and they were graduating from the primary years program, and some of the work that they did absolutely blew my mind. Some of the projects and the portfolios, it really challenged me to raise my expectations of what these students are capable of. And as I mentioned before we hit record, teaching in an IB school really spoilt me for anything else, because I've seen what's possible. And I think it is an incredible organization. To get to hear some of the things that you're involved in across the globe is truly inspiring. What are some of your priorities as the Director General?
I would like to say that there are kind of 3 things. The first one is that the organization was created in 1968. At that time, it was truly there was a social purpose behind. Those people from 12 schools, they wanted to create from scratch an education system that would make sure that the horrors of the Second World War would never happen again. And then there was that international mindedness aspect also involved. I've been thinking a lot about the question that how would those people who did it at that time, what would they expect of us? And I believe that they would ask us to engage with the world we are living right now and see that what does it take for us to make a difference in this world? That question of how can we reform our programs in a way that they are relevant for young people in different parts of the world? That's the first thing that I'm trying to do my best. The second is connected to the fact that IB was born in Europe, and it has mostly grown in the developed world and in also the English-speaking regions of the world. And we in the organization believe that we can do a better job also being meaningful for those parts of the world where we are underrepresented today. And there I'm talking about Africa, I'm talking about parts of Asia, where we are strongly concentrating now and finding ways also how to make sure that students in those locations would have access and financial possibilities to kind of utilize the programs. So that's my kind of second task that I'm working. And third one is that IB is also an education system. We are global by nature, but we need to be also a role model how an education system functions. And that means that we are moving away from kind of compliance-based approach to schools to more kind of creating solutions together with schools and again kind of using the power and strength of that community and all the educators in it, use their expertise for the solutions that we are making when we are developing our activities and programs.
Yeah. Wow. They're three pretty big, pretty important goals, but they seem so worthy of dedicating your time and attention. I mean, it's wonderful to hear some of the goals and initiatives for the IB. As I mentioned, my experience working in an IB school was truly transformative, and I miss it. You've inspired me to get along to one of these global conferences at some point.
Yeah,
so I'll make sure I sign up for the newsletter. But that's really incredible. Olli-Pekka, I want to be respectful of your time. And so just a few more questions, if you don't mind. You've just written a book. So why should people learn as if life depends on it? Once again, a very broad question, but tell me about your book and why. Is that just a provocative title, or do you think that we really should learn as if life depends on it?
I think we should. I think one of the big motivations behind writing the book were my own children and my first grandchildren.
Wow.
Because then you really start thinking about their future, what's ahead of them, how could they enjoy the joys and wonders of life the way that you have had a chance to enjoy. And therefore, I wrote the book to tell them how I see the world evolving today, and also kind of describing how I see that some of the strengths that we have emphasized when we are building our cultures and societies, we have underemphasized other perspectives. And if you look at the big challenges, the interconnectedness, the kind of the entangled world, we need to use all the capabilities that we as humans have, individually, but also in a collective way of working and decision making and sense making. And I think there's a lot that we can do better in that sense, that we have kind of concentrated on certain things and we have forgotten other things. Like for example, let's think the scientific way of knowing, which is so valuable and it has created so much kind of good things in our societies. But once we have concentrated on that, we have forgotten the other ways of knowing. We have forgotten, for example, the question that how much wisdom there is embodied in our bodies, that wisdom is kind of written in our bones and in our muscles, and it is something that also connects us with others, us being very social by nature. And how can we come together in that and not look each other only from the competitiveness point of view? And that's what we're doing. Individuals kind of look at each other a lot kind of from the competition point of view, and nations are doing it. And still, we're in a situation where the global challenges are shared. They are ours to carry and deal with them. And therefore, we need to learn to come together with our own perspectives, our values, but to come together in a way that we can solve those challenges. And that therefore it is learning as if life depended on it.
I think that is it's a wonderful title. And as soon as I jump off this call, I will order myself a copy because I think it's somebody had that conversation. I know for me, since having children, my passion and commitment to seeing education systems be the best that they can be has changed dramatically because my kids are quote unquote in the system now. And so what do you hope that your grandchildren will say about their educational experience? I know that is a long way in the future, but what are some of the things that you hope they experience as they travel through this sort of global network of education?
Yeah, I hope first of all that they would feel that they belong to the education community, that it is something that they feel that they are valued and respected, part of those communities, because that's their first experience really to engage on a larger scale with other people. And that's the model that they will have when they are entering life. So definitely that one. I would enjoy that they could learn to know themselves, to go that process of growth, which takes time, which is sometimes very difficult for us in these moments where we emphasize here and now. It's very hard to understand that the most valuable things and the human growth take a lot of time. For them to learn to know themselves through that slow process.
That's
And then maybe to have that open mind with the world, that they, because that's the engagement with the world, that it creates a huge amount of opportunities, and we have a lot of things that narrow us down these days. It's the opposite of that.
So inspired by your passion. I mean, I would have listened to 50 interviews of you over the last couple of weeks, and every time I've heard your voice on YouTube and on podcasts, you speak with such incredible conviction and amazing just hope for our education systems globally. So I can't thank you enough for having a conversation with me. Last question, if you don't mind. If we were sitting down having an oat milk latte, and I was just about to step into the teaching career, step into teaching for the first time, what advice would you give me?
That's a hard one. I would kind of probably say the question that kind of be yourself when you're using your expertise that you have learned with that profession. Because young people, and that was because I've been a teacher for a year in school, and my experience was that how clearly the young people analyze you as a teacher. Notice each uncertainty, and they notice if you try to fake something, they know it right away. You're kind of naked in front of them in a way. And it's therefore that being honest and being yourself is so important in creating that relationship with the students. And it's not about you being a teacher, it's about the students. So kind of also I would say that put your ego in your back, let it be there, and see the students in the classroom.
Fantastic. Olli-Pekka, thank you so much for having a conversation with me. I can't thank you enough. It has been a joy to connect with you all the way from Geneva to Sydney. And I'm so grateful for the important work that you're doing, shaping this conversation about education. Thank you so much for taking a moment to talk.
Thank you, Matthew, for letting me join and having this wonderful discussion. And thank you for the work that you're doing with the podcast. I think it's so great to offer the community of educators that kind of possibilities to hear different views. So thanks for me being part of that.
Thank you very much.